Hello, horror fans. This is Pete from the Lasser Cast, where we talk about all of your favorite horror movies. And tonight, we have a very special night. We are talking about episode 8 of 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time on Shudder. It is the finale, it is the top 10, as my co host with the most is doing down there. He's very cleanly shaven, looking sexy with his Killer Clowns from Outer Space shirt.
Yep, I'm getting ready for No Shave November. My students today, God, I wish I could have filmed their reactions. Oh my God, it was fantastic.
Yes, and just equally as sexy to my right over there is Mike Bongiorno from Pop Culture Man Children, the awesome podcast, which is also available on YouTube as well. Mike, I am so happy you're here with us tonight.
I'm happy to be here to talk about this controversial list.
Yes. We also, as a treat to you all, have made up our own top 10s, and I think you'll see that there are some things that were omitted from this countdown that we're going to address tonight. So, with that being said, let's get right into this bullshit, shall we? Number 10, Ringu. I have not seen the Japanese version of The Ring. Have you gentlemen seen that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thoughts?
I mean, I like it. I've always liked it. I think one way to read it is, well, this is kind of dark, but a way to read it is, it could be about, you could read it as being about child pornography and how it could come back at you. You put in this secret dirty tape that no one should watch, but the little girl is going to come out of the screen and fucking kill you.
Wow, okay. Starting off with child pornography. Okay, this is good. Yeah, I agree. Danny, you are not a fan of the American Ring.
I think that there might not be a horror movie that is more overrated in the history of humanity than the American version of The Ring. Yeah. And to the point where, now, I will be fair and come right out and say I know I am in the minority when I say that. When I saw this movie in the movie theater, I was up in college in SUNY Binghamton. I had a few of my friends come and visit me, and we all went together to see this. The entire theater was filled with teenagers and college-level people getting scared, girls jumping next to their boyfriends and everything. And there were 4 people in the middle of that theater laughing hysterically at what we all thought was one of the dumbest horror movies we had ever seen. And it shocked all of us that that movie became the big deal that it did. And I'm not going to take away, the American version of The Ring helped bring that J horror over to the United States. It started a whole wave of J horror films. Ringu is better. All the Japanese versions are better. The Japanese version of The Grudge is so far better than the American version of The Grudge. And the same director did both versions, which makes no sense. I think that the scare, the moment, the famous moment from these movies, I just think it's dumb. I actually remember, I'm not going to lie. And my friends will back me up. I whispered to my friend as it was happening, I went, if this girl climbs through the TV, this is the dumbest fucking movie I've ever seen.
Yes.
And the girl climbed through the TV and I started laughing in the theater. And I know that probably makes me one of the movie fan, the people in the movie crowd that people love to say, God, those assholes ruined the movie. But I just never understood why this was such a scary moment. I knew it was going to be, I thought it was going to be on the list, and then it wasn't in the last countdown, and I went, oh no, is it going to be in the top 10? Yeah. And I'm glad they went with the Japanese version and not the shitty American one.
Yeah.
But this movie never did it for me. This moment never did it for me. I don't get it. I know I'm in the minority, but I just don't get it.
So, forgive my ignorance, but one of the movies that's on the list, we'll get to it eventually, is Audition. It's in our top 10. Is Audition a Japanese movie?
Yeah. Yes, Takashi Miike, yes.
Okay, so Audition is a Japanese film, okay. So Mike, going back to your comment that you made about child pornography, it seems like for a lot of these Japanese entries onto this list, it's movies where essentially the sins in the past come back to haunt you, or you did something wrong
Right.
and now you're paying this gruesome price. And The Ring kind of think ties in with that. There was a murder and multiple people are affected. Like something bad happens to one person, but it also kind of poisons innocent people too. And I've never seen the Japanese version of The Ring. I was scared of the original Ring when I saw it. I think the opening is very scary too.
Well, I think you also, and this is not, every culture has problems with this, but you think about like J-pop stars, J-pop young idols, or the anime girl archetype. There is a thing in Japanese culture, and we have our own versions of it. I'm not mocking the Japanese, but there is a thing in Japanese culture of gazing at underage girls, gazing at young girls and fetishizing them.
Right.
So I think it, from within its culture, turns it on its head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really do think that is kind of the trend with all the entries on this 101 list of these like movies that are from Japan. And then I was wondering for the next movie that's on this list, Train to Busan, that is not Japanese, right? That is
South Korean.
South Korean. And I feel like South Korean movies that in themselves, they have like a different kind of vibe altogether, right? This next one did you guys have anything else you want to say about The Ring or Ringu?
Nope.
Okay. So I know that, Danny, you were a big fan of Train to Busan. Mike, have you ever seen it?
I saw it just today. I saw it after I watched this list.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to see all of them.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts, man?
I loved it. It was great. Great action movie. If they do 101 greatest action movies, I hope it's on it.
Yeah.
If they, how it gets to be in the top 10 of the scariest movies of all time, I have no idea. I mean, it's baffling.
I think probably because of Joe Bob's endorsement, where she said that like it was one of the rare movies that actually makes him cry at the end. Danny, so I haven't seen this movie, Danny, by the way. But awesome. I know that you were saying that the ending kind of rips your heart out. I can kind of guess what the ending is.
Yeah, right. I've seen they kind of show it, but yeah, I've seen it several times now, and every time I've cried at the end. As a parent, especially, it's heartbreaking. And I mean, yes, it's an action-themed movie, but I feel like you can say that about any fast zombie movie, like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
Any scares in this?
Oh, I mean, I think if you take out the word scares and replace it with tension, I think it's incredible tension. I think there's the moments, like they show the moments where the daughter is at the train station and you're watching the zombies come at her. Yeah. And you're like, oh my fucking God, are they going to kill her in the middle of this movie? And then all of a sudden, the guy who he went on to be Gilgamesh in the Eternals, the actor, punches out the one zombie and grabs her and rescues her. And what I loved so much about this movie is that you really start to love and fall in love with these characters, right? And it's also one of those woke horror movies because it's really a movie about class struggle.
It's and the difference with zombies. I agree with you, by the way. I loved this movie. I think it's awesome. I just don't think it's one of the 10 best horror movies ever made.
Right.
I think that, yes, I do think that this is a stretch to put in the top 10 for scariest movie moments. If it was a list of best horror movies, I honestly would not have a problem because, and I've said this publicly before, to me, this is the best zombie movie I've ever seen. I know that Night of the Living Dead is a much more important film in the history of cinema, and Romero's Dawn of the Dead is probably the greatest traditional zombie movie of all time. But just if you're going to take the character of zombies, to me, this is my favorite zombie movie that I've seen. Maybe this and Shaun of the Dead, if you could put two movies that couldn't be more different together on the same list. So I agree with you in the sense that scariest movie moments, maybe not, but
yeah, because the moment that they pick from this film is a sad moment. They kind of pick the ending. Again, we've talked about how we're not sure how much they're truly committed to the premise of we're picking moments because the moment, because a lot, by the way, on this list, the top 10, they would give 2 or 3 moments from each one of these movies.
Absolutely.
But with this, they gave a sad moment, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, I agree, it is a sad moment.
I think they also really for this one, they also focused on like the not just the endings moment, but the idea of like the not just fast zombies, but the fast zombie horde, and like the way that the zombies were shown, and like they even showed the World War Z footage to like show how. And I remember thinking that World War Z looked kind of dumb, the way they were building like the zombie pile to go up the. I thought that was a little ridiculous. Whereas in this movie, the way they're chasing down the train, it legit. Like it made me again, it didn't scare me, but it made me nervous that these characters that I've grown to like throughout the movie, are they going to make it? Who's going to survive?
Right.
And I love, not to spoil the very end of this movie, but there is a moment that could have been Night of the Living Dead ish, and they decided to go in a slightly different direction. Thank goodness. But
if you could remove this one film and put in the Poltergeist in its place, would you do that?
For 101 scariest horror movie moments, 100%. To me, and we're going to mention omissions later, Poltergeist is far and away. It's baffling to me that it didn't make this list. Right. I feel like they showed clips from Poltergeist throughout.
About the clown toy?
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's funny you bring this up. This whole discussion of like what constitutes a scary movie. Are there scares in this movie? Because, Aliens is on this list. I think there are scary moments in Aliens, but I kind of think of it more of like an action sci-fi movie.
Right.
Of course, Alien is a classic horror movie, with sci-fi elements. I do think, however, that when you go from 8 through 1, I don't think there's any kind of gray area. These are all straight up horror movies. There's no denying it. I'm not really surprised with any of these entries, but I am going to say something controversial. I actually love C. Robert Cargill. He's like a guy that I love to look at his stuff on Twitter, and he's a super supportive guy of writers. However, I don't think that Sinister should be in this top 10 list.
I agree.
And I always fuck myself up because I say negative shit about Cargill whenever I do a show, but I love the fucking guy.
It's great. I mean, we're talking about the Mount Everest here.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay. It's not a criticism of it. Like I said, I love the last movie we talked about. But I agree. I was kind of shocked by it. And that's a movie I like, but I was like, I was shocked by it.
I think
this was a movie moment that it's funny. Shudder sent out a tweet. What do you think is going to be in the top 10? So not to like brag, but I hit 8 out of 10. And I put the Sinister lawnmower scene on there just because it hadn't been on the list yet. And I assumed it would be there. Yeah. But again, we were here last week. Movies that were from 20 down included The Omen, Night of the Living Dead, The Exorcist 3 Scare, Jaws, Halloween, and Alien. All of those 6 ones that I just listed, to me, belong in the top 10 ahead of the first 3 movies on this list. Now, from 7 down, I have no issues with the movies that were picked and the moments that were picked.
Yeah, I agree.
But these 10, 9, and 8, I feel could have been moved back. But, hell, take Jaws, Halloween, and Alien and just put those as 10, 9, and 8, and I think we're perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Again, I agree with Mike. This moment belongs high up on this list. This was a scary fucking moment. But 8th all time, Mount Everest, as we're calling it,
Yeah.
I agree. It's nothing against C. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson. They have, unlike some people, I'm just messing with you, Pete, but I love the Black Phone.
Right.
I think they do phenomenal work in horror. And Sinister is a movie that I didn't love at first, and I've grown to appreciate over the years. Very similar to The Conjuring, actually.
Yeah.
And this moment and the musical cue and the jump scare, it's great. 8th all time, So yeah, I think it's also they really threw in some absolute classics on last week's list.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to have a lot of problems with the movies they selected from 7 down.
No.
So that.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is I think that the reason why they picked Sinister, because I think right now Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill are kind of like the darlings, or some of the darlings of horror right now. And there's some other darlings on this list still to come. But that there was this thing where Sinister was labeled as like the scariest movie ever made, like scientifically. There's
They
some kind
said,
of
there was like a scientific study that it was like people's heart rate went up the highest during this scene.
Yeah.
So if you're going to try to use science to prove your point, I guess I can't argue.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So Danny, you started talking about 7 through 1. I actually do have a problem though with this next movie being number 7. I mean, this is like, come on.
I know
like,
you didn't want The Exorcist on the list at all.
That's
No.
right. That's some pussy shit, man.
You
That
hate
thing
it
with
almost
the
as
girl.
much as you hate Cargill.
That's right. God, get this guy out of here. No, I mean, The Exorcist is like top 3 at least.
We guessed last week that it could be 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what's really funny is this morning, every Wednesday morning during this series, Charlotte and I, when she's getting ready for school and I'm getting ready for work, we'll always put it on, and we'll only be able to really watch like 3 or 4 entries on the list. So we watch the first 3, and then we get to number 7, and it's The Exorcist, and both of us at the same time went, "What?"
Yeah.
And it was like this gasping reaction of how can this be not at least top 5, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think what I figured out here is that The Exorcist is just so universally scary from beginning to end that there isn't really a singular moment that stands out above others. And
Yeah.
I think the moment that they picked as the moment, the crucifixion scene, is, to me at least, is probably the scariest moment in the movie, or at least the most shockingly scary moment.
Shocking, yeah.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I don't want to go ahead, but I would say that I would switch this out for 2. I would put 2 in 7's place and 7 in 2's place.
I like that. I like that a lot.
I have no problems with 2. It's like my
Neither do
second
I.
favorite movie of all time.
Neither
Yeah.
do I. I put it as 7 on my top 10.
Yeah. So, Mike, did you write a paper on The Exorcist? I feel like this kind of goes on with... No?
No.
Are you an Exorcist fan?
Yeah, huge one. Huge
Yeah.
one. I've read both books. I've seen all the films. I've seen the first film a million times.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, I love even watching the making of The Exorcist. And this scene in particular, I remember there's that story of Ellen Bernstein being pulled back by
she
the
got
stunt guy.
severely hurt.
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe this should be higher on the list, and I will mention this when we do our different versions of the list. The next movie, once again, I think top 5, The Shining. I think this is our last Stephen King on the list.
Yeah. I think this is a perfect film. And when I say perfect film, I mean it achieves exactly what it means to achieve. I think it's absolutely perfect. And I think what's wild to me about The Shining is, as incredible as it is, it's not influential. Meaning you don't see other filmmakers, you rarely see other filmmakers take things from The Shining. It's almost like he was so ahead of what he was doing. A little bit, you get a little bit in like Flanagan in The Haunting of Hill House, but I feel like the only director out there that's like doing a Kubrick kind of thing is Wes Anderson, and it's not horror movies.
It's an interesting a good point. I was a little shocked. I was doubly shocked that The Shining was number 7.
7.
And
No, 6. 6.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. That The Shining was number 6. I thought it was a shoo-in for the top 5. Which again, 6-5. I'm not going to argue too much, but I was really shocked that they didn't go with, to me, the scariest scene in the movie, which is Room 237.
Right.
Yes.
To me, that was the moment that when I was watching this as a kid, I could not. I had to sit there like this for that entire scene. Like I didn't even want to look at the good boobs when I was a kid. I was so scared of what was going to happen in that scene.
Yeah.
And they went with, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and him chasing her up the stairs very slowly and menacing. I really liked Alex Esso's point of view, though, in this, where as a woman, she talks about how menacing that is, and how like every woman has gone through that, not that level of menacing from a man, but some type of like being approached and being followed and stalked by a man who just won't stop. And I think it was also perfect that it's her, because she got to play Wendy in Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, though. This could have been number one for me. This is one of, especially as a kid named Danny, this is one of the scariest movies of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Mike, you come on here, you just kind of drop these bombs. You like make your statements and then you drop a bomb. Like, you know, The Ring is about child pornography coming to get you. And then Wes Anderson is the only person copying, you know, Kubrick. I'm like, whoa, what? But I love it, man. I love it. For The Shining, it was such a big part of my childhood. My family loved The Shining. My aunt and my uncle, who I always thought were way cooler than my mom. Sorry, Mom. But my aunt, like I mentioned in a previous episode, was this big Stephen King fan. She has all of his books. They would just quote these scenes. And I think that this particular scene, just kind of through osmosis, is just so commonly used. You know, there's memes of him sticking his head through the door. Here's Johnny. Like, there's just so much of that. It's like, I think that's why they went with that versus Room 237, but I do think that Room 237 is scarier.
They kind of, again, they tried to have it a bunch of different ways. They also kind of tried to imply that the twins was the scariest moment.
Yeah.
Like 3 moments.
Yeah. I think that what happens with these horror moments is that they are parodied in like spoof movies and shows like The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, but they show the stuff that essentially you can get away with like on television. Like you could show Jack Nicholson saying, "Here's Johnny," but you can't show a naked woman coming out of the bathtub and looking like a zombie. Yeah. So I think that's why it kind of stands out more. It's more known.
One of the things that I just that I loved about this last episode, even though we could argue about the movies and the choices and the orders, is usually I think they were doing like 12 movies, per episode. Because it was the top 10, I feel like they gave each movie a little bit of extra time, and they gave some behind the scenes footage. We got to see some of the footage of Kubrick directing and some of the stuff about Shelley Duvall. And what I liked about that is, these are your top 10. You want to give them that time. And so, it does feel like, we've mentioned this, Pete, how they kind of cheat the idea of an individual moment, but because they're giving them more time here, they do show a lot more individual parts. They show Here's Johnny. They showed the twins in the hallway. So I think that for this episode, the last 10, I think it works a lot better.
Agreed.
If you had to pick a jump from this movie, I would actually say it's when Grady is walking through the main hall and Jack pops out from behind a pillar with the axe and gets him.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge shock, it's a huge jump, but it's also like the death of hope. Because you see this long journey of, I'm going to save this little boy, I'm going to get a snowplow, I'm going to get on a plane, and then boom, you're dead instantly.
Yeah. It takes the wind right out of your sails. It's I mean, a really good choice, but I do think it should be in the top 5. And then that brings us up to number 5, which is Psycho. Now, for Psycho, I feel like there's 2 scenes that they focus on in this episode. They focus on the iconic shower scene, and they focus on the scene when the detective is going up the steps, and then Norman comes out and gets him. So I think that, once again, with this shower scene, it's so iconic because of the way it was made, first of all, and it was sensational for the time. But it is another thing that can be parodied because, like they comment in this episode, each shot, I think Mick Garris is the one that says this, that each shot is kind of boring, but it's the way that it's edited. Edited, and then the score too, which he pointed out that it's all strings, and that's the first time I've ever thought that in my life is like, oh yeah, that's all. There's no percussion; it's just all strings, no horns. Really interesting points. My daughter just watched Psycho for the first time this year, and she was impressed. And I think that a movie that came out, when did this come out? Like the 60s?
1960.
1960. I mean, it is such an old movie at this point, but that it still scares a kid from today. I think that just shows how powerful this movie is.
I'll let you know, because the reason we started about 10, 15 minutes early tonight is because I have a 7 o'clock tickets to go see Psycho in the Alamo Draft House, and it's being hosted by Peaches Christ, a drag queen who's going to be talking about like the queer heritage of Psycho and the connections to it. And Charlotte's actually going to be seeing it for the first time. When I made sure when Charlotte was watching this morning that she skipped over the whole Psycho section so that like she would be like experiencing at least some of it for the first time. Like she knows the shower scene, of course. She knows some of the music, but she doesn't know like everything that happened. So, I mean, what more has to be said about Psycho? This was another one that, like we said last week, might be number one. Yeah. So, you know, it's an all-time classic.
Top 10 of movies.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So then that brings us to our top 4. And now the only reason why I know about this scene is because I'm thinking about the Bravo 100 Scariest Movie Moments or whatever countdown, and they show this in that countdown. They show this scene in Audition.
That special kind of introduced it to a lot of Americans.
Yes. So I've never seen Audition. Mike, you kind of had some stuff to say about like J-horror. What do you think about this film?
Well, again, and I don't remember which commentator said it, but one of the commentators on this special said, you know, notice how young the girls are that he's auditioning. It's what's interesting about this film is, and they say this in the special, it almost begins like a rom-com. It's not. It's sort of like a constant build, and then just the last half hour are absolutely terrible. And something that they didn't talk about in this, but the thing that for me always got me the most was there's a point where he kind of like wakes up and you think it's a dream, and then he wakes up from that, and it so screws you over as an audience member, because you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's over now. And then, no, just kidding. We're just messing with you. It's not over. You have to, I mean, like, not to get too like film theory on it, but it's the perfect movie to talk about the classic Laura Mulvey's visual pleasure narrative cinema, the male gaze. Okay. This is one of the biggest theories in cinema studies, that when we see women in film, we are identifying with the male character who's gazing at them, whether it be them gazing at them in the screen, on the screen, or us as the eye of the camera gazing at them. Are you ready? Is there a poltergeist over there?
I don't know what the fuck just happened, but yeah, power almost went out. Please keep going film theory though. I'm kind of scared the fuck out, but just keep going though.
So, and again, I think it's significant that his ruse is that he's making a movie. I don't think that's by accident either. His guise of finding this young woman to kind of prey on is through, I'm making a movie and I'm going to audition you. And then it completely turns on its head. Maybe like in terms of movies that really deal head on with this theory and try to subvert it, I'd say maybe this and Hitchcock's Rear Window.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, she puts needles in his eyes. It's almost like a punishment. It's a punishment for looking.
Yeah. I love they showed the scene after she uses the wire and she just takes his foot and like chucks it at the wall really hard.
Yeah.
But I think it might have been Eli Roth's History of Horror that talked about this. Oh. And they talk about how, you know, like that first hour can be like, it almost feels, or first 45 minutes, yeah, it almost feels like a rom-com, but there's this underlying sleaziness to it of this, where it's like you're supposed to identify with this sad old man who's looking for a new wife, but also he's a sad old man conning young women into like under false pretenses to marry him. And he's not really like, you know, he kind of reaps what he sows here.
Right.
And yeah, like Asami is supposed to be like this. I mean, she is an absolutely insane horror villain.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to look at him as like a, you know, is he a victim or is he getting really what he kind of deserves at the end there? And it's, I remember the first time I saw this movie. I think my dad of all people might have been like, "Holy shit, you got to watch this movie." And then like I watched it, and I remember the scene with the bag, and me going like, "What the fuck?" Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's one of those movies where I feel like this is one of those movies. I think it came out in '99, where the second you saw this movie, you recommended it to everyone you knew. This was like the Boondock Saints of horror movies, and like if you had a VHS or if you somehow got it on DVD, you would like share it around because you wanted other people to talk about this movie with you. And I think that it does belong very high on the list. I have no problem. I thought, Pete mentioned this 2 weeks ago when we like talked about what's left, what can be in the top, and Pete mentioned this one, and I think like this is the movie that I have no problem being in the top 10.
Yeah, it's so ironic because I have not actually seen this movie. I've seen that scene with the bag, and then I remember seeing the scene where she's sort of using the cord or whatever to cut off this guy's foot, and I was like, holy fuck, I don't think I could watch that. And so it's interesting though, right? Because you said it came out in '99, and it's so before its time because there's before the whole Me Too movement and the idea of like all these lecherous men sort of like doing the casting couch thing, and in this movie they're getting their comeuppance. And I think that like just horror in general, I know I kind of mentioned that this had to do with Japanese horror, but I think that like horror in general, a lot of it is like if you're going to commit the sin, you're going to pay the price, and it kind of sounds like what's going on here.
Do you remember the film Hard Candy from 2005?
Yes, of course.
You just have to look it up.
Ellen Page.
It's got a little bit of that in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elliot Page. Yeah. I totally agree. I can see that there too. Mike, have you ever seen the movie Fresh that came out this year?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but just based on what you guys were saying about this movie, it was kind of reminding me of what Danny and I were saying about it. I recommend it. It's on Hulu. Number 3. So when I did research for our own personal lists, I just looked up like scariest horror movies because I wanted to see like what am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? And this next movie was always very high on people's lists, if not number 1. And it's a movie that came out very recently. Of course, I'm talking about Hereditary. Hereditary is a movie that I've only actually seen once. I remember scenes vividly, and watching the scenes in this episode just reminded me of how fucking well made this movie is. It is ridiculous.
It's a contemporary classic.
Yeah.
With it being on this list, it will last for a long time.
Yeah.
I've said many times on this channel, this is easily, for me, the best horror movie of the 21st century. And it's one of the few movies that legitimately terrified me. I think I've told this story where right after I saw this movie, this scene in particular, the scariest scene that I can remember in probably the last 20 years is when Peter wakes up at the end and the camera is kind of fuzzy. It's dark. You don't really see anything. And then all of a sudden you see Toni Collette in the top corner of the screen, and your mind is playing a trick on you because she's there. Because in your head you're going, no, it can't be her. Because what the fuck?
Yeah.
And right after I saw this movie, I came home, I went to bed, and in my old bedroom, my wife had a white dress hanging from a hook, and we had a ceiling fan. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I just saw a white dress blowing in the wind, and I almost had a fucking heart attack. And I had to get up, leave the bedroom, and sleep in the living room.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that this was number 3. To me, this Toni Collette, it's still baffling to me that she did not receive an Oscar nomination. It's one of, to me, the greatest omission from the Oscars of all time, how she at least didn't get nominated for Best Actress for this movie. And maybe it's, the Oscars, poo-pooing horror.
Forever. I say it again. Fuck the Oscars.
Yeah. But this is, Mike said it. It's a contemporary classic, and it will stand the test of time. I do love one of the talking heads mentioned that while they were watching this movie, they were laughing because of how uncomfortable and how scary it was. I did that during Midsummer, which was Ari Aster's follow-up, where I was so uncomfortable and I felt so awkward watching some of the scenes in Midsummer that in the theater I was laughing and I couldn't help it. Like I was like, it's a natural reaction to some of these scenes, and it was like I don't know how to handle what I'm watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And Aster has that type of, because like I think it was somebody else was, when Charlie sticks her head out the window in the car, you're thinking they're not going to do this. They're not. No way. They're not going. Wait, what the? Did they just do that? And you're like,
yeah. But see, that scene in particular, it really shows how powerful choices are in a film, like what you choose to focus on. Because I remember that scene. Everybody remembers that fucking scene where the little girl gets decapitated, right? But it's like they choose, and they say this in this episode too, they choose to show the son. He goes back home. He's in his room. There's a close-up of him in his bed, and you just hear Toni Collette just fucking like sobbing uncontrollably. And that is almost so much more effective than any kind of, like, you could have just shown her head in the back seat and like a little blood spurt could have came out. That would have been upsetting. Right. But man, is that so much worse. And then the fact they cut to her face covered in ants on the side of the road.
Yeah.
It's just so well done. Mike, did you have anything more you wanted to say about Hereditary too? Or?
Well, to Danny's point, I remember I saw it in a theater, and the tension was so high. After the little girl has died, there's a moment where you hear, which is a noise she would make, and just that little noise made everyone in the theater shout, and then we all laughed.
Yeah.
Right. So number 2 on this list, there's some laughs in it too. I'm talking about one of the scariest horror movie moments of all time. I am talking about the library scene in the Ghostbusters film when the librarian, comes out and I'm talking about
my list. That was almost on my list.
See, I knew that. I was actually going to put Gremlins on my list, but we'll get to our list in a couple of minutes. Let's breeze through these next 2. We've never covered The Thing on the Lasser cast, but we should. It is a fucking masterpiece. Go ahead.
This is a great scare too. The scare it's you do not see that coming at all.
No. The defibrillator, to me, this movie has some of the greatest scare moments and some of the greatest tension moments. For tension, the blood test scene is one of the greatest moments in horror history. But for pure scares, and then just what that one scare begins, that sequence of it goes from defibrillator, body opens, bites the arms off. You're going, holy fuck, I can't believe that just happened. And then it goes to the head bursts out, the head rips off, the spider legs come out. It never stops. It feels like in that moment. And like Charlotte and I were saying this morning, when it gets to the thing, it's got to be the defibrillator. It's got to be. And like, I remember I was assistant coaching with my old high school for the wrestling team, and I had to get CPR certified. And I'll never forget, like, when you're a coach, you have to learn how to use the defibrillator. And I'm walking around, I'm carrying it to like one of our matches. And there's never a moment where you have a defibrillator in your hand where you're not thinking of the scene in The Thing, where like, is this body going to open up?
Right. And Mike, that the way the mouth opens up too kind of reminds me of a Ghostbusters toy too. Like it looks like a Ghostbusters toy, right? Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
I always think of, there was, for the young people back in the earlier days in the internet, there was a website called E-Bombs World that would have funny videos, and there was a video that was shocking scenes and moments, but cut together with Admiral Akbar going, "It's a trap." And it just, he's like getting ready to like do the defibrillator, and then it's a trap, and then he puts it in and rips the balls off. So I always think of that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's really great about this scene is that it's the second time he does. It's not the first time. So your mind, he goes boom, puts his head down to listen for the heartbeat, nothing, and you're going, oh shit, I kind of like this guy. Damn, he's gonna die of a heart attack. And your mind has already left the fact that he could be the thing, because after all, he already did the defibrillator and nothing. So now he goes for it again, and you're not expecting anything. So when the mouth opens up, it's an amazing scare moment.
So
yes, definitely worthy of being in the top, 5, and it's fine being number 2. The next one is, I think, where we might have some controversy. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, right. Danny, I know you're a big fan, Danny, but Mike, are you a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Yeah.
I don't know if I'd make it my number 1, but I don't argue this. I don't argue it.
Nice.
I think I find it fitting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
It's funny. Like Dana Gould said, it's a good 70s movie. Oh wait, did he say that about Texas? He might have said about something else. But it's got a naturalism to it. It uses natural light. It uses 16 millimeter film. It uses a lot of long takes, meaning long breaks without editing or changing the camera, and it uses non-professional actors, so it feels very, very real.
Yeah, 100%.
It has a very documentary feel, and what's scary is, to me, what always was scary was it's not like Freddy Krueger going like, "Ooh, I'm going to kill you." It's a guy who thinks of the killer thinks of the humans the way we might think of cattle. The way someone working in a factory thinks of a chicken. Like, you're not even a real life to me. I'm just looking at you as meat. And that's what's so scary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know I disagree with Charlotte here, but I got really nervous when The Thing was number 2, because I'm thinking to myself, again, I'm like, my Toby Hooper brain is going off, and I'm going, Poltergeist hasn't been on this list. If they don't put Texas Chainsaw, like at this point, if Texas Chainsaw isn't number 1, I'm gonna flip the fuck out, because they can't have omitted it from the list.
Was 2 on the list, or am I
Texas Chainsaw 2?
Yeah.
No,
it wasn't. Okay.
I do love Texas Chainsaw 2.
I love it,
but I love this movie so much. To me, this is a top 5 horror movie of all time for me, and very similar to Mike. What makes this movie so scary is it's also there's nothing like Leatherface. I always felt like he gets unfairly lumped in with these supernatural slashers. Jason by part 6 is a zombie returned from the dead who can't be stopped. Michael Myers is the epitome of all evil. Freddy is a dream demon. Leatherface is a guy. He's a mentally challenged guy who wears human skin masks, and if you invade his home and he doesn't know who you are, he's going to smash your head open with a hammer and throw you on a meat hook. And to me, he's so different from these other characters. And the thing that makes him different, as Mike said, is there is a sick realness to it. And it's also the fact, and they brought this point up, as crazy as it sounds, it's almost a bloodless movie.
Yeah.
It's the most deceptively bloodless movie of all time. And it's the way it tricks you, the way and Joe Bob mentions it, and Mick Garris talks about how they filmed the meat hook, and you're looking at the meat hook, you're looking at it, she's getting closer, but you don't see anything, and it's that like awful feeling. The most blood I think you see is when he hits the guy with the hammer. Like even the one scene in the movie where he kills somebody with a chainsaw, you don't actually see them, like it's not Terrifier 2. You're not watching him saw human flesh or like dummies and gelatin. It's in the dark. It feels like you're watching this grainy footage, like you found a VHS or you found film stock in your basement, and you're like, oh, what's this?
Right.
It feels it's a dirty movie.
Yeah.
It's a real dirty movie, and I think it lends it such credibility to me, if I was picking one moment in this movie, I think they hit two of them perfectly. But to me, the dinner scene and the way that they zoom in on Marion Burns' eyes in that scene, it's so unnerving. No matter how many times you see it, it's one of the most unnerving and just bizarrely funny but terrifying scenes in movie history.
It's so the tea party from Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
it's so sick.
Yeah. I kind of love that this is number one. I kind of low-key love that it's number one. I totally get why other people, obviously movies we mentioned, The Exorcist, Psycho, The Shining. I get that there's more traditional picks for number one all time, but I just love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I have no issues.
Yeah. You bring up a really great point, Danny, about how it feels like this grainy thing that you find in the woods. And I think that when you grow up, when you're a kid, when you're in your youth, movies are talked about in a certain way, like urban legends sometimes. The idea of don't go by Cropsy's house in the woods, for us people from Staten Island. But then, another thing is, have you seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? That's the scariest movie. You watch it, it's going to fuck up your head. Blair Witch Project is like that, too. It's this is a real movie, right? And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I remember growing up, and as a kid, it's that's the movie. That's the scariest movie, if you ever see this one. So it's a rite of passage to watch it. It's so ironic that, they're kind of treated like urban legend monsters, and they're just fictions. But I think that now, since we have 15 minutes left in our recording.
Well, the last thing I'll just add, and it has to do with that, is I feel like when we were growing up, we're all about the same age. I feel like if my dad saw me watching Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or Halloween, he would have been like, oh, all right, you're watching a horror movie, no problem. If he would have seen me watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it would have been like, no, turn that off.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. I feel like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they make a point of this, that the title of the movie itself is almost more graphic than the whole movie.
Right.
And it just
sounds
gives
like
off this
headline.
Yeah.
Right. With John Larroquette reading it. Yeah. So okay. So what we're going to do next is we are going to go through our personal top 10 lists. And we're just going to kind of skim over the ones that we've already kind of talked about on this show. I figured that way we could do this is we could do a little Laser Cast sandwich where Mike is the meat. He'll go between me and Danny. I'll just go through mine real quick. And mine, I want to preface that these are not in order. So it's not like the last one.
Mine either.
Yeah. So these are just where I would put my personal top 10. Ready? Here we go. Halloween. Michael's face appears out of the darkness. They did that on this show. Alien. Instead of the chest burster, I do when we first see the alien and he comes down from the chains and gets Brett. Right. Thank you. Shining, Room 237. You mentioned that before.
Hot.
Here's my first thing.
This is the sexiest scenes, yes?
Yes, sexiest scenes. Well, here comes a sexy scene right here and an omission. I poo-pooed on Scott Derrickson before. I think that The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a scary movie. And so I put when what's her name? Jessica Carpenter? Or is that Cordelia? Or
when the camera pans to her on the floor.
Yes.
Charisma Carpenter.
Charisma Carpenter's Cordelia. Yeah. But when she's on the floor, yes. So I put that in my top 10. Here's one I was amazed was not on this 101 scariest movie moments. The alien walking by the party at Signs.
Ooh, yeah.
I was like, that's not on there? Okay. Hereditary, the ending. The Exorcist, we already discussed this before, but when Reagan is sitting on the bed at the end, when she's got out the straps. Here's a weird one for me. In 28 Weeks Later, what's the guy's name? Robert Carlyle, right? He goes and he sees his wife, right? You just did it, Danny, right? His wife is strapped down. She has half of the virus or something. She's not turned. He kisses her. He gets the virus and he pushes her eyes in while she's strapped to a table. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I feel like that movie's underrated as hell.
Never seen it.
Oh, I highly recommend it before Halloween. Here's one that I think is going to be on Danny's list, maybe even Mike's, but let's see. Event Horizon.
I just wrote it down.
Okay. Event Horizon. Sam Neill, when he's like in the corridor, I think that's maybe the scariest moment in that movie. But Event Horizon as a whole, it should have been on this list.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, this might be controversial. This to me has had an impact on me. We talk about people not wanting to go to the beach because of Jaws. Me, I personally, if I'm in like a subway station and there's loud noises, if I'm taking a shower, I sometimes imagine getting eaten by the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. And I think that's because that T-Rex scene in the rain is like a fucking masterfully shot scene.
Yeah.
And so I'm surprised that nothing from Jurassic Park was on any of these lists. So
yeah.
That's my top 10.
That's awesome.
Now, Mike, you're the meat. Why don't you, in our sandwich, give us your top 10.
Okay. Two things real quick. One, I did it as jump scares. I tried to really rank scares. And this is an order from 10 to 1 for me.
Okay.
And I cheated and didn't do just movies. Okay, let's go. Number 10 from 1985, Garfield in Disguise, also known as Garfield's Halloween Adventure. When Garfield and Odie are in the cupboard and the pirate ghost comes through, huge jump scare. Number 9, Resident Evil 1996, the video game. When you turn the first corner and the dogs jump through the window, huge jump scare. Number 8, Friday the 13th from 1980, The End. This was on the 101 list. Number 7 from 2014, It Follows, The Tall Man. The Tall Man in the hallway. Number 6, A Nightmare on Elm Street, when Freddy pops up from behind the bed. Heather Langenkamp sitting on the bed and she thinks he's gone. Number 5, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, The Radio Station. This is a rare jump scare where it's not something coming from outside space. It's something coming from within the mise-en-scène outward, because he's in the dark and then they flip the light on and he comes out towards her. Number 4, Jaws, Ben Garner's head. Number 3, the documentary The Nightmare. There's a scene where one of the women is talking about her sleep paralysis demon, and then there's a jump scare in a documentary. A demon just shows up and screams, and you're not expecting that in a documentary, and it scares the shit out of you. Number 2, The Haunting of Hill House, when Nell comes from the backseat. That's
oh my god,
the best scares ever, honestly.
Oh.
And it's also narratively interesting because she's stopping her siblings from fighting, so it makes sense why she would do it. And number 1, The Exorcist 3, the nurse and the nun.
Excellent list, and I think you really did a great job putting them in order. I remember that Garfield Halloween special. You on your show Pop Culture Man Children did a special on jump scares, right?
Yeah.
That's why. Okay, great list. That sleep paralysis documentary. I think I maybe have seen it, but maybe not. But it's like really scary, right? For a documentary.
Yeah, it's pretty for a documentary. You're not expecting scares.
Yeah. I like that you included a video game on there too with Resident Evil.
Go in the kitchen.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever played the Resident Evil? I think it's Village. No, not Village. Like it's called like Biohazard or whatever. It's like the one where you can put on virtual reality.
Yeah. No, I haven't played that, but I have played Village, and there's a great jump scare in Village.
Yeah.
That fucking there's a jump scare where you have to look out a window to get a code to open a safe, but when you look out the window, there's a jump scare, and there's no way around it. Like, and I even played it again, and I went outside the window to see if I could find the zombie. It's not there. It doesn't. The program does not make it come out until you're in that moment looking out the window. It's amazing.
That's fucking beautiful. Yeah, I remember playing. I think the one before that. I can't remember what it's called, but it was like where you could play it in virtual reality. You know, have the VR helmet on, and that was just fucking terrifying. But, but I really appreciate your list, man. That's some good answers, man. I think we have just enough time for Danny to do his. Did you have anything you want to say about Mike's choices too, Danny?
No, I mean, Nell, the backseat scare in Haunting of Hill House. I watched Haunting of Hill House twice. Once just when it debuted, and then I rewatched it when Bly Manor came out for our review on this channel. And it's one of the only jump scares that legit got me both times I watched it. Even when I knew it was going to happen, I was like, all right, here it comes. Don't go, son of a bitch. Like, it got me twice.
It doesn't allow you to be settled. The camera cuts back and forth and jumps over the line, right? In cinema, you have to stay on one side of the axis. It jumps over the line, so your brain can't get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to a couple of omissions from the list that I thought should have been on this list and weren't. The dinner scene in Freaks, Gooble Gobble, we accept her.
Yes.
One of us.
The Taking of Deborah Logan, one of the best modern found footage movies, has a scene at the end where you see what the demon is, and it's like, what the frick is going on?
Yeah.
Amazing scene. And I feel like they showed the Insidious red-faced demon like 12 times, but they never put it on the list.
Right.
Which I found very strange.
I'd rather that than Sinister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
point.
Sinister and Insidious are like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So here's my top 10. Like Pete, I have no particular order here. And I also cheated a little bit by combining a few things. Well, one thing. So I'll start with that because it involves one of the omissions. Basically, reasons why I hate clowns today as a 40-year-old. It 1990, basically anything Tim Curry did. And the clown puppet in Poltergeist, don't understand how it didn't make the list. It's the single most glaring omission on the whole list.
Yeah.
Although I will say how on earth did this not make the list? Another one of the movies on my list, Pet Sematary, Zelda. Every scene with Zelda, the sister, as a kid especially, oh my God, I could barely look at her on screen. Terrified me. Hereditary, Toni Collette on the wall, my freaking God. The Omen, when the new nanny sneaks in and kills the mom in the hospital, the way the music is playing, the way that she's taking off her gown and you only see little bits of the nanny coming in, so freaking scary. Jaws, the Ben Gardner's boat, and then to me the greatest jump scare of all time, when the shark pops out of the water as Brody is chumming, you're gonna need a bigger boat. Those scenes, Michael Myers coming out of the darkness in Halloween, we talked about that. The dinner scene in Texas Chainsaw, Room 237, and then a movie that was on the list, but and maybe the scene, but not really. The floating kid outside the window in Salem's Lot.
Oh, okay.
That scene on TV as a kid, holy shit. You talk about not wanting to take a shower, not wanting to go in the ocean. I never wanted to look out a window ever again. So yeah. So those are my top 10 scariest horror movie moments of all time. And I didn't mention it, but yes, I only listed 9. Event Horizon, not the scene that you're talking about, but when they find the recording of what happened to the crew, and you only see bits and pieces of it because it's like,
yes,
but they're like torturing each other and killing each other and doing nasty things to each other. And I called it the Liberate Me scene because that you hear the Latin phrase Liberate Me, and like that gave me goosebumps and creeped the hell out of me. And I was convinced that was going to be on the list. Maybe they just don't like Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yes. And probably Paul Thomas Anderson either. But what I was going to say was that we have 1 minute left. And what I was going to say is one point I wanted to make was Mike Flanagan is the last
jump scare
voice. He's help us build up our bravery. And I think that's very funny that Flanagan is the last voice. He's obviously on the rise. He's been on the rise for a while. People respect his name.
Say that again. Say that whole thing again because you froze. Start at the beginning of it.
Oh, shit. Mike Flanagan is on the rise. He has the last say in this whole documentary. And, of course, he's had an impact on our channel, too, because, we are the Lasser cast, right? And I think that it's just kind of cool that he said that these movies essentially build up our bravery. I think there were some excellent moments on this list. There were some crazy omissions. I don't want to omit Mike's channel, Pop Culture Man Children. If you're listening to this as a podcast, go check out his channel. On the Lastercast, we have a shit ton of interviews that are coming up still this month, and Danny just is covering Chucky and all kinds of other shit in less than 1 fucking hour. We got this all done. Mike Bongiorno, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy Halloween.
Danny,
Happy Halloween, guys.
I look forward to looking at
you. Halloween.
Nice, perfect. That's a perfect way to end it. Thanks, guys. This is it.